support them in every way possible. We also are asking God to forgive the people who, out of vainglory and needless aggression, brought about violence in the Abdekuma North Riran election. And we hope that all Ghanaians will come together to condemn any sort of violence that will suppress freedom and the human rights of the Ghanaian people. In fact, if the people of Akwatia listen to the budget presented, the media budget presented by the minister, they will wonder where this self-promoting report on the economy has been concocted from. The minister was basically self-promoting himself, instead of actually speaking to the reality on the economy. If drivers were listening to what the minister presented, they might question whether the minister is trustworthy. In just 5 months of managing the public purse, the minister has broken his promise to pursue efficiency at ECG and has introduced instead the Dumso levy. Today, we are all paying almost 4 Ghana cedis for every gallon of petrol we buy. This goes against the promise to reduce the cost of petrol. If utility-paying Ghanaians were listening to the minister, they would ask if the government is honest. In the first half of the year, this government and the minister have increased electricity tariffs by a cumulative 17%. This same minister, on 3rd March, pledged during the so-called National Economic Dialogue not to let the ordinary Ghanaian pay for the inefficiencies of ECG and the energy sector. So what has changed, ladies and gentlemen? If the small-scale miners were listening, they will wonder what they had heard from the minister. In just 3 months, the government has failed to fund the gold board it established. The Bank of Ghana has been paying upfront and incurring unnecessary costs because gold board has failed to raise the required resources for its operations and has also failed to pay a competitive price for the gold it purchases from small-scale miners. The result is that last 2 weeks, small-scale miners expressed their frustration. They are highly displeased with the prices paid to them by the gold board, even when global gold prices are at a record high. They are facing hardships. If the spare parts dealers were listening, they would marvel at the minister's deception. Just last 2 weeks, the spare parts dealers in Kumasi demanded action on the unfulfilled promise to reduce the duty at the ports. This month, we also witnessed a demonstration by residents on the Ofanko and Sawam Road, as the government has failed to fund the contractors to continue work on these important roads. If the nurses were listening to the minister, they would note how insensitive this government is. If everything is as good as the minister wants us to believe, why did the government fail to meet the needs of the nurses? The Ghanaians who lost their family members and were affected by the nurses' strike know better. If the 320 recruits who have been unjustly sent home from the Ghana Police Service heard what the minister presented, they will realize that this narrative is not about the Ghana they live in. If the over 730 recruits wrongly denied employment in the Ghana Immigration Service were listening to the minister, they would treat the minister's presentation with skepticism. Again, ladies and gentlemen, if the 50 young people unfairly denied jobs at the Narcotics Control Commission heard what the minister presented, they will see it as a high-pitched propaganda. The collective experiences of many young people being wrongfully denied employment offer no reassurances regarding the recent promise by the government to recruit over 70,000 health personnel. On external sector, you all know that the current account in 2024 recorded a surplus of 1.1% of GDP, reversing the deficit of the prior year. Gross international reserves reached $8.9 billion by end 2024, well ahead of IMF targets. This performance stems from high gold exports and remittances, strong FX inflows via the Bank of Ghana's domestic gold purchase program, prudent FX management and monetary policy. Yet, the mid-year review fails to acknowledge that this buffer was inherited. The minister's attempt to dissociate today's gains from yesterday's effort is both analytically flawed and institutionally damaging. For example, the minister was upbeat about this government achieving accumulated gross international reserves of $11.12 billion, covering 4.8 months of import as at the end of June 2025, compared to $8.98 billion, covering 4 months of imports as at the end December 2024. And I'm quoting the minister. This is what he said during the presentation of the mid-year budget. But what the minister did not tell the people of Ghana is that the $11.12 billion is not completely a new accumulation. It includes the $8.9 billion inherited from the MPP government. The only new addition was $2.2 billion. But if he's comparing 11.1 billion versus 8.9 billion, it is as if they accumulated $11.1 billion. And we left office with $8.9 billion. But that is not the case. The 11.12 billion includes the 8.9 billion that they are seeking to undermine. Ladies and gentlemen, we may want to ask the minister and the Bank of Ghana what they did with the extra $2.8 billion brought in by Gold Board. Because they said, also in the media review, that the Gold Board brought in $5 billion. So if you inherited $8.9 billion and the Gold Board brought in $5 billion United States dollars, then the international reserve, the gross international reserve, should not be 11. It should be more than 11. So there's an extra 2.8 billion. The minister was silent on that. We want to know what happened to that. Why is it not part of the reserves, the international gross international reserves of the country? But this is also because we know all along that the Bank of Ghana has been pre-financing the gold purchases by the Gold Board. In any case, we are not sure about the level of scrutiny the Gold Board is subjected to. Whereas the minister stated that in the first half of 2025 alone, gold exports from the small-scale sector stood at 51.5 tons, with an export value of $5 billion. That is first half of the year. President Mahama, on the other hand, said recently, when he launched the Gold Board Task Force, if you recall, that Ghana earned $5 billion from nearly 52 tons. So the minister is talking about 51, the president is talking about 52, up to May, while the minister is talking up to July. So there's apparent contradiction between what the minister has said and what His Excellency the President said. This apparent contradiction between the President and his finance minister calls for proper scrutiny of the work of the Gold Board. On the exchange rate situation, the minister indicated that, and we all heard it. He said, "Sidinu apiki." That's what he said, isn't it? The developments in the foreign exchange market under this administration are deeply troubling. We are witnessing persistent arbitrage between the interbank market and the Forex Bureau, alongside a growing scarcity of foreign exchange. Perhaps the minister should know that, yes, Sidi no apiki, but Abuchi get the dollar, as my brother Honorable Adongo once said. And the arbitrage we are seeing is quite wide. Whilst the minister is talking about interbank rate of 10 cedis to a dollar, the Abuchi is selling it at over 13 cedis to a dollar. And on top of that, the banks don't have Forex to give to their clients. We have heard many people complaining about how long it takes, the documents they have to present, to be sent to the Bank of Ghana for clearance before they get Forex from their own accounts, their own Forex accounts. They cannot get. Transfers that they have to make to people they buy goods from abroad, they are not able to do that. They are incurring losses as a result of that. Ladies and gentlemen, the shortage of dollars in the bank has been so pronounced that importers have gone public to express their frustration about the situation. It is evident that the Bank of Ghana has been intervening significantly in the Forex market through auctions, bilateral sales, and using other tools, despite the Bank of Ghana governor denying such intervention were happening. If you recall, around February, March, the Bank of Ghana governor was boasting that they are not selling dollars. We all heard him say that. It took the IMF to disclose that in the first quarter of 2025, the governor has injected over $1.4 billion into the market. So who is who? Which is which? It appears the governor of the Bank of Ghana has turned himself into a politician, trying to make a political statement when he's supposed to be independent of the finance minister. And this is why the IMF has cautioned the bank about the sustainability of such a policy. As the IMF rightly observed, and I quote, "Looking ahead, deepening the interbank forex market by reducing Bank of Ghana's footprint and allowing for greater exchange rate flexibility, including through the adoption of a formal internal forex intervention policy framework, should be a priority," unquote. This is the advice the IMF has given to them, to stop the kind of ad hoc interventions that they are doing, which does not give room for flexibility and predictability. We on the minority side are interested in measures that sustainably addresses the Forex situation, including availability of Forex in the banks, including reducing our dependence on cheap imported products, which drains significant Forex from the country every year, by deliberately improving domestic production through initiatives such as the 1D, 1F, which they have abandoned. But this is what would have helped us, take away cheap imports, which is taking so much Forex from the system. The next MPP government will address the FX flows. There will be availability. One way in government, there was availability. Now, there is no Forex availability. The next MPP government will address this. On the debt restructuring exercise, in the mid-year review, the government praised itself for a number of unearned achievements. The minister stated, for example, that Ghana's public debt to GDP ratio, as at the end of June 2025, was 43.8%. He compared that with the 61.8% at the end of December 2024, and thereby stating that the public debt as a percentage of GDP reduced by 18% in just 6 months. The minister said that. He also said that Ghana's foreign debt as a percentage of total public debt declined from 57.4% at the end of 2024 to 49% in 6 months. That this has significantly improved Ghana's debt sustainability, and that our debt to GDP ratio is at a 5-year low. The question we ask the minister is, how much of Ghana's public debt has the government repaid since they assumed office? How much? Zero. They haven't repaid any of Ghana's debts. And so, if the debt to GDP ratio has reduced, how is the minister able to claim that they have done magic. Yet they have not repaid any of Ghana's debt. It is no secret to any of you in the media the painstaking efforts the MPP government made to restructure our debt, particularly with our external commercial creditors. That led to outright debt cancellation of $5 billion and a debt service savings of $4.7 billion. So when we talk about reduction in the debt stock, which then will reduce our debt to GDP ratio, this is what we are talking about. But apart from this, what else has the new government done in terms of reducing our debt stock? Ladies and gentlemen, what the NDC government is saying cannot hold water. In the same mid-year budget, the minister tried to claim another unearned credit when he stated that, and I quote, "Our credit rating has improved from junk to B-, with stable outlook, a 2-notch upgrade, and a 4-year high." He's talking about the rating upgrade of Ghana by Fish. And he wants to claim credit for that. But we know that the rating upgrade by Fish was due to, again, the success of the debt restructuring exercise the MPP government did. If you care to know, I will read what Fitch itself said when they upgraded Ghana. And I quote, "The upgrade of Ghana's long-term foreign currency IDR to B- from restricted default reflects Fitch's assessment that Ghana has normalized relations with a significant majority of external commercial creditors. Ghana restructured its $13.1 billion Eurobonds in October 2024, unquote." And this is by Fish, Monday, 16th June 2025 at 12:31 p.m. ET. This is by Fish itself. Now the question I ask, ladies and gentlemen, is, was the Honorable Dr. Atu Forson the finance minister? Was he the finance minister in October 2024? A big no. He wasn't the finance minister in 2024. Yet Fitch is saying that the rating is as a result of the normalization of Ghana's relations with significant majority of its commercial creditors, and that Ghana restructured its debt, $13.1 billion, in October 2024. And this is the reason the relationships have been normalized between Ghana and our external bondholders. Yet, the Minister for Finance is claiming credit for the Fish upgrading of Ghana. Sadly, in his attempt to win public sympathy, he used copious pages to lambast former President Nana Addo Akufo-Addo for undertaking the debt restructuring exercise. But is it therefore not hypocritical to condemn the former president for undertaking the debt restructuring exercise, and then you turn around to claim credit for the success of the same debt restructuring exercise? Is it not hypocritical? How do you criticize an exercise and accept the product of the same exercise? We know that Ghanaians understand this kind of economics, the NDC economics, which is to keep repeating falsehoods about the economy, thinking that it will stick on the minds of the Ghanaian people. But merely repeating falsehood does not make it truthful. The Ghanaian people know what is happening, and we will continue to remind them about what is happening. We have now seen officials of this government posing for photo opportunities with foreign officials for the announcement of debt relief for Ghana by our bilateral creditors. Yet they cannot even show integrity by acknowledging the people who negotiated and reached these agreements over the last 2 years. This is also dishonest. How can Ghana go so low? We know that government is a continuum, and you can read the entire budget without acknowledging that your predecessor did something, especially when we did it, and you want to claim it. That's not the honesty President Mahama promised the people of Ghana. You will also recall that during the debate on the 2025 budget statement in March 2025, we pointed out our disappointment about inadequate provision for the priority programs of the government, an indication the government does not intend to fulfill its promises, the promises they made to the people of Ghana. The mid-year review has proven this case to be true, as the minister has failed to release adequate funds, even for the programs that have budget lines for the ministries to implement these programs. We have heard various ministers complain to us, expressing their frustration about their inability to implement the priority programs because the Minister for Finance is not releasing funds to them. I'll give you some examples. The National Apprenticeship Program, which is one of their flagship programs, they allocated 300 million Ghana cedis. Half of the year, the minister has released only 21 million Ghana cedis. That is just 7% of the allocation. How is he going to release the rest in the second half of the year? And so this should tell you that the year will end with the minister for the program, the minister responsible for this program, complaining that he hasn't been able to achieve the objective. They will come back to present the next budget, and you will see them repeating this program because they have failed to adequately fund it. You look at the Ejumara program, they allocated 100 million Ghana cedis. They've released only 34.5 million, half of the year. Agriculture for Economic Transformation Agenda, under which we have Feed Ghana program, we have the Ghana Grains Development Project, we have the Vegetable Development Project, and we have the Popular Nkoko Nkitinkiti. They allocated 1.5 billion Ghana cedis for these programs. Ladies and gentlemen, it will sadden you to know that half into the year, the minister has not even released one cedi for the implementation of this program. Half into the year, not one cedi has been released. Yet they have launched the Feed Ghana program already. Women Development Bank. You recall all the controversy about the inadequacy of this allocation. That of all the support the women of Ghana gave to the NDC, you are putting 51 million Ghana cedis to set up the Women Development Bank, which is even lower than the minimum capital requirement. We complain about this. But the sad news is that it is not only small, but as I speak to you, half into the year, not one cedi has been released for the establishment of the Women Development Bank. It's very sad, isn't it? And the women of Ghana, I know, are listening. The National Codex Program, again, they allocated 100 million Ghana cedis. They have released zero. The National Codex Program, my friend, Minister Sam George, is upbeat about the National Codex Program. But how is he able to implement the program if the minister has not released funds to him? And this is why I believe it hasn't been launched. Or has it been launched? It's been launched. It's been launched. It's been launched. Yet no cedi has been released. And then big push. Big push. The famous big push. We have heard about big push all the time. Yesterday on the floor of Parliament, we heard so much about big push. 13.8 billion Ghana cedis allocated for that. Again, half into the year, not a cedi has been released for the implementation of big push. So we are at a loss. And I don't know how serious this government has taken the trust of the people of Ghana. If you also remember, we have consistently stated that the government did not provide budget for the 24-hour economy, in spite of the fact that they launched the program on 2nd July 2025. The minister has now conceded in the mid-year review that it will provide funding in the 2026 budget to implement the program. The question is, why do you launch a program when you have no budget to implement it? We know, but we on the minority side know why the minister has failed to fund these priority programs of the government. We know. Because the records show that out of the total 28 treasury auctions held from January 3rd, 2025 to July 11, 2025. 13 auctions failed to meet the auction target, with bid cover ratios below 1, despite high participation in the early part of the year. Therefore, the minister had to divert the funds meant for these priority programs to fund the auction shortfall, which would not have arisen if he had not manipulated interest rates on government treasuries. Billions of cedis have been used to fund the auction failures. That is why he's not able to fund these priority programs. And that is why, ladies and gentlemen, they are introducing new taxes and increasing the rates of existing taxes. Ladies and gentlemen, what is even intriguing is the fact that the minister celebrates the artificially induced interest rate developments in the Treasury security auction. Yet, there is no coordination between the Finance Ministry and the Bank of Ghana. How is the minister able to borrow at 15% on average, yet the Bank of Ghana borrows at 28% from the same market? From the same market, 15% versus 28%. And yet the minister stood on the floor of Parliament and said there is proper coordination between the Ministry of Finance and the Bank of Ghana. This is a clear case of poor coordination between them. It is a case of fiscal policy misaligned with monetary policy. How can the Ministry of Finance borrow at a rate far different from the rate at which the Bank of Ghana borrows? Is it not intriguing that the same market shows such significant arbitrage in rates, even though the OMO bills, the open market operation bills, the Bank of Ghana bills, are purchased solely by banks? The minister's actions have greatly affected price discovery in the market. The Bank of Ghana is conscious of the inherent risk in the economy by the actions of the minister and is not prepared to follow the complacent path taken by the finance minister. This is why they haven't brought their rate down. They are currently having an MPC meeting, and we hope that they will use that opportunity to align monetary policy with fiscal policy. In fact, even with all the noise they made about the gold board, including pushing the gold board bill through a certificate of urgency, as I said earlier, the minister has not released a cent out of the $279 million that he allocated as revolving fund for the gold board. Currently, the Bank of Ghana has been pre-financing the gold purchases. And this is a clear case of monetary financing. This is monetary financing. The IMF program frowns on monetary financing.
Printing money.
Printing money, monetary financing of the government. And under the IMF program, the Ministry of Finance and the Bank of Ghana signed an MOU that the Bank of Ghana will not fund the government any longer. Yet the Bank of Ghana is incurring a huge cost in funding the gold purchases of gold bond. If they were buying the gold for the Bank of Ghana, one would have expected that the gold reserves will increase. But ladies and gentlemen, the gold reserves have not increased. And if the $5 billion gold board brought in was to be used for improving on the gross international reserves, ladies and gentlemen, the gross international reserve is short of $2.8 billion from the $5 billion the gold board is supposed to have brought in. So Nasikano, where is the money? Gold reserves haven't increased. The Forex reserves haven't increased by the magnitude of the money the gold board brought in, even though Bank of Ghana has been pre-financing all the gold purchases by the gold board. Ladies and gentlemen, on wages, the minister in his address tried to justify the dismissal of over 1,000 Ghanaian youth from employment just because they were recruited under the MPP government. And for those who were lucky to escape from the wicked hands of the NDC government, they are being blamed for the alleged wage pressures on the government. To put this in context, let me quote the minister. Mr. Speaker, we have seen some significant pressures on the compensation budget for the first half of 2025. The wage pressures were largely driven by the last-minute recruitments undertaken by the previous government in the last quarter of 2024. And he's issuing an executive directive mandating all MDAs to seek approval from the Minister for Finance before making any commitment with financial implications on the payroll. This is unfortunate and shocking. First, it is shocking because the Minister knows already that all recruitments into the sectors that he has mentioned, education, health, and security sectors, recruit only after financial clearance from the Ministry of Finance. So if the Ministry of Finance has given financial clearance, as we did, then the Minister was well aware of it even before he came to present the 2025 budget. How come he could not budget for it and now tend to complain about exceeding the budget for wages and blaming these recruitments for the situation? That's not acceptable, ladies and gentlemen. But what the Minister has forgotten to tell the people of Ghana is that there are several advisors and special assistants and some of your former colleagues, media specialists, that have been imposed on various ministries, departments, and agencies, and we all know it. He didn't talk about that. He's only talking about the wage, pressures leading to excessive wage bill because of last-minute recruitment. How about the recent recruitment of advisors and special assistants, and media specialists, communication specialists? How about them? If the Minister wants to know the reason for the excessive wage budget, he should not look far. His office alone has countless number of advisors. Countless number of advisors. And they are even marginalizing civil servants. Civil servants who have been recruited and paid with the taxpayer money. They have brought in advisors and paying them again. And now your wage budget is excessive and you are blaming the recruitment that were done last year for which financial clearance was issued. It is important to state, ladies and gentlemen, that the Ghanaian workers have been dealt a raw deal. While the government adjusted wages by just 10%, its revenue policies have increased the burden on the Ghanaian worker. The government statistician only last week announced that electricity inflation reached 139% in June 2025. What does that mean? Inflation, electricity alone, the increase in the price of electricity and its impact on inflation alone is 139%. This is historical. This is unprecedented. 139% electricity inflation alone. And this is 10 times more than the national average inflation rate. I'm not saying it. The government statistician said it. Ghana Statistical Service. Ladies and gentlemen, we also know that the Dumsor levy of about 4 Ghana cedis per gallon of petroleum has been operational since 16th July this year and has already led to prices of petroleum products increasing by 8%, contrary to the promises by the government. You recall, when they brought the Dumsor levy to Parliament, the bill to Parliament, the Minister for Finance said this was intelligent, smart, intelligent. This is how to manage an economy, that you bring in a levy or you increase a levy and it will not have impact on prices of petroleum products. I'm sure you also heard the Minister for Energy and Green Transition boasting, this is the only government that can increase levy and yet petroleum product prices will not increase. They were boasting on the floor of Parliament and all Ghanaians saw them. So what has changed? Why is it that we had increase in petroleum product prices by 8% as a result of this levy? Some people should have resigned, isn't it? By now, some people should have resigned. Ladies and gentlemen, So just when Ghanaians were getting used to the Dumsor levy and its effects, the government used the mid-year review budget to increase levy on marine gas oil, which is used by vessels in the fishing industry. And it was rushed through Parliament, as usual. This government has become a government of certificate of agency. Everything, even the scholarship secretariat authority bill, certificate of agency, everything. You want to tax the people of Ghana and you are rushing the bill through certificate of agency. How impatient is this government to tax the people of Ghana by using certificate of agency to pass these bills through Parliament? So they have increased the levy on marine gas oil used by vessels in the fishing industry from 23 pesos per liter. Listen on, 23 pesos per liter to 1 Ghana cedis, 93 pesos per liter. That's how many percent, what percentage? That's about almost 1,000% increase. 23, how many times? That's about that. 23 pesos to 1 Ghana cedis, 93 pesos, almost 2 Ghana cedis pesos. Marine gas oil used in the fishing industry. And this is what I wish to call henceforth a fishing levy. It is going to affect fishing and the prices of fish products going forward. Fish is a delicacy sitting by majority of Ghanaians. So let's wait and see what will happen as a result of this tax. The same government, if you recall, promised that it will not resort to taxes to raise revenue, but will rather cut down on waste. They said they will cut down on waste and corruption, isn't it? And that they will save billions to get the revenue to run this economy. This same government is now resorting to taxes. And when the people of Ghana were expecting the government to use the mid-year review to fulfill its promise of abolishing the COVID-19 levy, it came to make another promise that it will abolish it in the 2026 budget. That's the new promise. They have opportunity to abolish it. They refuse to do that. They are now telling you that wait until the 2026 budget. We will abolish it in the 2026 budget. Ladies and gentlemen, let me now defer to my brother, the Honorable Gideon Babu, to continue.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Our friends from the media, we have listened to an elaborate presentation from the former finance minister. At this point, I would like to draw your attention to some data inaccuracies and misinformation that were presented by the finance minister. We must all be worried that anytime the finance minister of Ghana, Dr. Ato Forson, gets the opportunity to speak to us, he goes around to peddle falsehood and present data that are misleading just for political expediency. The finance minister and the office that he occupies, as I have said before, is an office that must be accorded the needed dignity and respect. And as they say, respect is reciprocal. And therefore, the minister ought to know that it is not in the interest of the integrity of Ghana and himself to use information and data that are not accurate when presenting budget of the nation. Among the many misleading information the finance minister put out is the fact that he had indicated that this government has been able to record a primary surplus in our accounts at the end of June 2025, and sought to suggest that this is the first time Ghana has made that recording in terms of our primary surplus, and therefore we should applaud the government. We will applaud the government when genuinely they have done well, but we will not allow falsehood to take over the truth. This information put out by the minister in Parliament was false and misleading. If you're looking at the primary balance of this country in the recent years, during the era of the previous MPP government, in 2017, 2018, and 2019, the previous government recorded primary balance surplus. So it cannot be true that the minister wants us to sing for him because they have had a half-year primary surplus. In fact, during the half year of 2024, the previous government still recorded a primary balance surplus. And the interesting thing is that the primary surplus that was recorded in 2017 was rather the first time Ghana was recording such a surplus in 15 years. We had always been in the negative. It took the previous NPP government to bring the negatives to positive. Again, the minister's claim in paragraph 1A3 of the mid-year budget statement that for the first time in Ghana's history, there is a negative 15.6% rate of debt accumulation because the public debt had reduced by 113.7 billion in 6 months cannot be true. It is true and it's accurate that today we have a negative 15.6 rate of debt accumulation, but it cannot be true that this is the first time Ghana is recording a negative rate of debt accumulation, i.e., this is not the first time that we are having our debt stock reduced. It cannot be true. And the reason why it cannot be true is that between November and December 2022, Ghana's debt stock, on account of the heavy appreciation of the cedi that time, reduced from 382.7 billion cedis to 240.9 billion cedis, i.e., Ghana's debt stock reduced from November 2022 to December 2022 by 141.8 billion cedis. And that was because, you remember, during that time, upon the announcement of a policy signal for gold for oil and other interventions that were made by government, the cedi appreciated between November 2022 and December 2022 from 13.1 cedi to the dollar to 8.3 cedis to the dollar, close to 5 cedis reduction. And that is why the debt stock reduced at that time. So today, when I see and I hear from our colleagues in the NDC celebrate overboard the almost 2 cedi or 3 point something cedi to the dollar reduction in the Forex, I laugh, because in November to December 2022, the previous NPP government brought down the cedi to dollar rate from 13.1 cedi to the dollar to 8.3 cedis to the dollar. The debt stock had reduced drastically during that period. So it cannot be true that this is the first time the debt stock reduced. In fact, in October 2024 to November 2024, Ghana's debt stock again reduced by 47 6.8 billion cedis. So the fact that our debt stock over time gets reduced from its original position is not, and I repeat, is not peculiar to this particular government. In fact, the heaviest reduction was recorded in November 2022 and December 2022. But you see, my suggestion to the finance minister is that rather than using propaganda to smear the previous government, I will advise him to show humility and appreciate the solid foundation that was laid for him to chalk success by the previous government. The minister in paragraph 184 of the mid-year budget review statement touts the significant debt to GDP ratio reduction. And we must all know that even as we move along and rebases goes for rebasing, the debt to GDP ratio may come down further. Not necessarily because the government has done anything extraordinary, but because of rebasing. Anytime we rebase the GDP, the debt to GDP ratio will come down. But what he should know is that Ghana's debt to GDP ratio has reduced significantly, largely due to some robust measures initiated by the previous MPP government. And that is where he needs to show candor and appreciate the previous government where the need be. One of the key reasons why the debt to GDP ratio has come down is as a result of the debt relief, as was mentioned by the former finance minister, under the debt restructuring program, which was instituted by the previous government. If we had not initiated a debt restructuring program and had debt relief of over $5 billion, some of which they have benefited from this year, and just a few weeks ago, France even gave us 87.7 million euros as relief. All of these benefits are accruing to this government because of the policies that were put in place by the previous government. When it happens like that, your debt to GDP ratio will go down. Again, we have seen massive GDP expansion from 2024 till now. And once your base increases, obviously your debt to GDP ratio will come down. And you need to ask yourself, where is this expansion coming from? Expansion is stemming from 2024 and the periods before. That is basically what is accounting for this. The minister claimed that there has been a reverse of the cedi depreciation to the 2022 level. And here he mentions the fact that they inherited a cedi to dollar rate of 17 cedis to $1, and they have brought it down to 10.4 cedis to the dollar. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a plain lie. There has never been any record by the Bank of Ghana during the last 8 years of the previous MPP government whereby a dollar was sold at the interbank market for 17 cedis. It never happened. You can pull the historical data at Bank of Ghana and you will never see this happening anywhere. In any case, if you look at the data put out by the finance minister, he computes or talks about the rate of appreciation in paragraph 43 VII, and he states, and I quote, as at the end of June 2025, the cedi appreciated by 42.6% against the dollar, unquote. This is the rate of appreciation the minister talks about. I want you all to do a simple mathematics. From 17 to 10.4, you do the exchange rate computation, 10.4 minus 17 divided by 10.4. If indeed they met the cedi to dollar rate in January 2025 at 17, the appreciation would have been around 65%. So if you use the minister's own data, it contradicts the falsehood that he tried to put out. But in truth, the cedi to the dollar rate that this government met in January 2025 was 14.7. So why is the minister lying and quoting 17? If you compute cedi appreciation from 14.7 to 10.3, you will get the 42.6% he's talking about. But if you compute from 17 to 10.3 or 10.4, you'll be getting somewhere around 65%. So why is the minister using 42.6% and still lying about the exchange rate that they met? This calls into question the honesty and the integrity of the minister when he speaks. And it is important we point this out. Now, if we look at the exchange rate development, it is important that we recognize the need to have currency stability. In most cases, if you have appreciation, it helps you, but of course, such levels of appreciation must be underpinned by economically aligned natural causes and not artificial manipulation, as we have seen in some cases. But it is important to recognize there are two critical features about any currency. And these two critical features about any currency, which must be seen to be attained, if not attained holistically, are the rate of exchange of that currency with respect to other trading currencies, and then also the purchasing power of that currency. You can have a stable currency that cannot go to the market and deliver the kind of goods that you demand. So whilst you work towards stability of your currency, you must make sure that prevailing economic circumstances also warrant that when you take that currency to the market, you'll be able to get your cocoa, your bread, your wheat, and the milk that you want. Because the true value of every currency, in actual sense, lies in its purchasing power and not the exchange rate. So much as I agree that exchange rate stability is important, the purchasing power of that currency is also important. But today, what is the purchasing power of our cedi? If you move across Malata market, the Tachima market, the Abafo market, you will have a shock of your life, because we seem to have a relatively stable currency, but the purchasing power of that currency seems to be dwindling. And I say this because in January 2025, a bag of cement was sold for 90 cedis, but in April, the same bag of cement was selling for 130 cedis. You need to ask yourself, what is the potency of the currency in terms of purchasing power? We had Sure deodorant selling in January 2025 for 35 cedis, but today it sells for 45 cedis. We had Standard loaf of bread selling in January 2025 for 18 cedis, but today it sells for 23 cedis. We have bottled water, a pack of bottled water in January that sold for 28 cedis, today sells for 36 cedis. And what I like most, ball of kenke in January was either 3 cedis or 5 cedis, but today it sells for 5 cedis or 7 cedis respectively. This is the true situation on the ground. The rate of exchange may be stable, but what is the purchasing power of the currency? And that is something that the finance minister ought to pay attention to. You remember that in the early days of the government, the mighty minority drew government's attention to attempts by the central bank to pump dollars into the forex market to achieve stability. When we said this, the government, with all the vehemence they could marshal, disputed. Despite the IMF's recent caution to the government, which also corroborated our earlier suspicion that the government had put the cedi on dollar steroids, the finance minister unashamedly denies the fact that the Bank of Ghana interventions in the forex market on the back of the strong reserves built by the MPP government is the significant reason for the strength of the cedi. Unfortunately, he says a certain fiscal consolidation is the reason for the strength of the cedi. Strangely, we are not told the specific constituents of the fiscal consolidation that have driven this stability. But I have a problem with the fiscal consolidation efforts implemented by this government. Yes, fiscal consolidation seeks largely to address the imbalances in our revenue and expenditure, to reduce budget deficits and public debt. You can achieve this through various measures, including spending cuts, revenue increases, and debt management. Among these three, a careful observation of this government fiscal consolidation efforts points to one main thing: increasing revenue through taxes. So whilst you could achieve fiscal consolidation in multiple ways, either by cutting spending, increasing revenue, or debt management, this government seems to solely focus on revenue generation through taxes. I say this because whilst the government spending cuts approach is incoherent, not substantial, and completely nebulous, not much is realized from its debt management approach. Rather, we have seen substantial efforts either at largely introducing new taxes or increasing existing ones. In 7 months, after claiming to abolish taxes that were non-existent, this government has introduced about 10 new tax handles in 7 months. This is unprecedented in our history. And some of the taxes they have introduced include increasing growth and sustainability levy from 1% to 3%. They have increased the sunset clause of the growth and sustainability levy from 2025 to 2028. They have increased the 1%, introduced the 1% special import levy, introduced 21.9% VAT on life insurance premium excluding motor vehicles. They have increased fuel prices by 5% on diesel and 2% on petrol. That excludes what they did recently. They have increased prices of locally manufactured plastic products by 7%. They have increased water tariffs by 4%. 14.75% increase in end-user electricity tariffs in April, and 2.45% increase in July. Just last week, the Ghana Statistical Service reported that electricity inflation has gone up year on year by over 130%. With this, one does not need a seer to tell us that the average Ghanaian is being made worse off. These taxes have introduced significant structural cost pressures, and they are affecting the everyday life of the Ghanaian. So you can clearly see that instead of focusing on massive spending cuts and proper debt management to bring the debt levels lower, the government's focus on fiscal consolidation is the introduction of taxes. Of what benefit is fiscal consolidation if the underlying catalyst is tax increases. A fiscal consolidation that is at the burden of the Ghanaian taxpayer is nothing but a rip-off. So the fiscal consolidation efforts by this government is rather worsening the living conditions of the Ghanaian person. Meanwhile, there are other alternatives to achieve the same result without overburdening the taxpayer. Ladies and gentlemen, while Ghanaians have been reeling under these harsh and difficult tax regimes, the government is introducing some more hardships by increasing fees and charges for some public goods and services by between 30 to 40%. With this, in the transport and vehicle services sector, we are going to see vehicle registration fees go up. We are going to see roadworthiness inspection charges go up. We are going to see driver's license renewal fees go up. We are going to see commercial transport permits go up. And the concomitant effect is that transport fares will also go up. With this new fees and charges review, between 30 to 40%. In education-related charges, we are going to have exam registration fees go up, teacher trainee certification and licensure fees will go up, school registration fees will go up. For those in businesses, business registration and renewal with the Registrar General's Department will go up. The trade import-export license permits with FDA, EPA, and national lottery authorities will also go up, and commercial signage and advertisement costs will also go up between 30 to 40%. In the health and medical services, national health insurance registration and renewal premiums will go up. User fees for outpatient consultations and diagnostics tests will also go up. Charges for birth and death certificates and vaccinations will also go up between 30 to 40%. Again, in the land and judicial services, court filing and hearing fees will go up. Bail bond administration charges will go up. Fees for official gazette publications and legal document searches will also go up. And notary and authorization fees will also go up between 30 to 40%. In the security and identity services, we should expect to have an increase in police clearance certificate fees. We should expect to have increase in fire certificate and licensing fees. We should expect to have private guard and company licensing fees go up between 30 to 40%. In immigration and citizenship services, passport application and renewal fees will go up. Visa processing charges will go up. Entry or departure stamp and certificate of citizen fees will go up. And work and resident permit fees will also go up between 30 to 40%. And lastly, in water and sanitation, we will have new water connection and meter installation fees go up. Monthly tariffs and services charges will go up. And sewage and sanitation services will go up by 30 to 40%. The outturns. This outturn shows that as we increase all these charges on top of the many taxes that we have introduced or the government has introduced, the average Ghanaian is going to be made worse off. These are the things the minister ought to avert his minds to and find means to address them, rather than seeking to command plaudits that are unwarranted. Thank you very much, and at this point, I'll hand over to my senior colleague, Opon Kroma, to complete the session for us.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you recall the minister spent a few hours. So we are also having our few hours. But I'm going to conclude with just a few remarks. But ahead of that, let me just give you an anecdote. It's a story of a mother who promises her children that I'm going to prepare for you 3 square meals a day. That is the promise. That is the strategy. And as the day starts, the mother fails to provide 3 square meals a day. And a co-tenant in the compound house ends up feeding the children. The children have been fed, not so. But can the mother say that she has fulfilled her strategy? No. Act 921 is the Public Financial Management Act. Section 15 of Act 921 says that before you come to Parliament, you prepare what we call your fiscal strategy document. So if we are doing the review, the mid-year review of the budget, we have to ask ourselves, what was the fiscal strategy that the government came into the year 2025 with? And then we can measure the performance and compare to that strategy and determine whether or not this mother succeeded in preparing 3 square meals for the children as promised. So what was the fiscal strategy? On the 17th of January 2025, and I'll start with the revenue side, the then Minister for Finance designate told the whole Ghana, after he had sworn an oath on the Bible, that he was going to increase revenue by 13 or from 13 to 18% of GDP without introducing new taxes. This was the gravamen of the revenue side of the fiscal strategy. And he was fortified when he came to Parliament to present the actual numbers by telling us that that strategy was going to lead to revenue of 102 billion Ghana cedis by the end of June. In fact, when we started the discussions, we cautioned that the taxes that were being removed was going to lead to a minimum of about 6 billion Ghana cedis revenue shortfall. So if he was going to be able to increase revenue without increasing new taxes and there was a potential 6 billion shortfall, then his revenue strategy, if he could achieve it, will support him. I'm sure you all recall this conversation and this long debate. On the expenditure side, he also said that he was going to spend about 128 billion Ghana cedis. And again, we cautioned that coming from where we were coming, it was important rather to approach fiscal consolidation through expenditure cuts, like what Gideon was speaking about earlier. Indeed, if you go back, earlier we had mentioned, we had even put out an estimate that it should be about 3% of GDP for the year. You recall Dr. Baumia modeling 3% of GDP, about 30 billion Ghana cedis. And so again, we cautioned that that expenditure strategy, as part of the broader fiscal strategy, was not going to lead the results. The minister told us that at the end of the day, it will lead to a primary balance of 0.4%. So mid-year, you have to compare this strategy to the outturns. Colleagues, on the revenue side, after sweeping 11 billion Ghana cedis balance brought forward that the MPP government left, which the NDC government claimed there were no buffers, after they swept 11 billion, they now introduced at least eight new taxes. If you add some of the tariffs to it, it will even be more than that. So after sweeping 11 billion and introducing 8 new taxes, they are still short of about 3 billion Ghana cedis revenue. That is why we say in all humility that the revenue side of their fiscal strategy is failing. In fact, you recall that when we cautioned, the minister told us that there was a smart way he was going to close the gap by reducing the VAT retention threshold from 6% to 4%, and that would be enough to close it. Again, I'm sure you recall. We are realizing mid-year that it's all hogwash. On the expenditure side, contrary to the commitment that they will be spending 128, and I'll speak to that shortly, they've had to cut back by 19 billion Ghana cedis. Multiply that by 2, second half of the year, that's about 38 billion. It's coming close to what we had urged on the government to cut. And so we say in all humility that the fiscal strategy under Section 15, which he presented, has failed. And he's now reversing and coming to the alternative propositions that the minority gave. But because that was not the original strategy, it is now leading to major gaps in public service delivery, in goods and services. Because as we've explained over and over again, these numbers in the fiscal strategy, nobody chops them. They are not an end in themselves. The primary balance of 0.4 that he had programmed, nobody pays his school fees with 0.4%. It is the public goods and services that you deliver from the expenditure side that Ghanaians feel. So if you fail in the fiscal strategy, it will show up in the delivery of public goods and services. And that is why you are beginning to see, as former Minister Amin outlined, you are beginning to see that the government is not able to fund a lot of the things that would translate into public goods and services for the people of Ghana. All they are saying is that they have paid salaries, item 1. And they have done transfers to statutory payments, item 2. Item 3, thanks to the debt relief program that was done, which they complain about and they still take credit for, they are not spending so much on that. But item 4, goods and services, particularly for the programs that they themselves advertised, you are finding 0%, 0%, 0%. It has now become clear that they launched all of those programs so that they will meet the 120-day timeline that they had set for people to applaud and say the government was doing well in 120 days. But they knew that the fiscal strategy they had put in place cannot fund the actual execution. So they launched it with a lot of fanfare, but the releases, 0. And that is why those public goods and services, the young men and women who were singing Queen, Queen all over the place, because they had confidence in these programs, they are now finding out that the budget released is what? 0. And if the budget released is 0, you can register for the National Coders Program. Will you be coding? No. You can register for Nkokon Kitinkiti. Will you get Nkokon Kitinkiti? No. You can register for National Apprenticeship Program. Would you be recruited as an apprentice? No. So we are drawing attention to the fact that the fiscal strategy that the minister put in place, no matter the grammar that he's using to try and cover it up, has failed. And now he's having to revert to the alternatives or the critique that the minority side gave. And that is what is now translating into 1.1%, which he says you should clap for him. The mother who promised her children 3 square meals a day did not feed them. And now somebody in the compound house who fed them is saying that clap for her because the children have been fed. The other matter, colleagues, is the fact that public goods and services are the real ends that Ghanaians are looking for. And yesterday we gave a few examples. A lot of people are looking for healthcare in their communities. My community, for example, we are looking for healthcare. We don't have a district hospital. When you succeed in your fiscal strategy, you will get money on the revenue side, financing, as Minister Amin spoke about, and then you can spend it. When you fail, you won't get that money, so you will not be able to continue Agenda 111. Are you seeing Agenda 111 continue today? So healthcare is having its challenges. When nurses go on strike and require an increment or a payment of some of their obligations that have been contracted, you can't fund it because your fiscal strategy is doing what? It's failing. And so we have drawn the government's attention to the fact that the fiscal strategy has failed. We have seen what they are doing. They are now trying to turn around and use the recommendations that we gave. But this thing is not sustainable because at some point you have to do what? You have to start spending, not just on paying salaries or statutory transfers or debt servicing eventually when it comes there, but you will now have the obligation of funding your goods and services and more importantly, what? Capital expenditure. I want to close with just a few comments. We also made some recommendations. Just as we made recommendations at the beginning of the year, which appear to have been rejected, but now you see what is happening. We will continue to make some recommendations because we're a patriotic opposition. One of the first recommendations that we are making is that the government, at least in 2026, needs to be more pragmatic with their fiscal strategy so that they don't end up where they are again. And in so doing, we have recommended, we even put a full statement on the floor, that the government needs to pay more attention to public-private partnerships. You can't find everything out of the treasury. So you have to have an intelligent way of crowding in private sector so that they can fund what you can't fund. The way to do that is through public-private partnerships. There's a division at the Ministry of Finance known as a Public Investments Division. We have suggested that if there's anywhere the 24-hour economy should start, that's where it should start. So that you have people there working 24 hours who can receive proposals and do all the feasibilities from the private sector and be more effective in crowding in private sector money for you to do what the Treasury cannot fund. And I'll give you a specific example I'm familiar with. Saglemi. I was Minister for Works and Housing. Saglemi had stalled for several years because the project had not been completed at the time we inherited. The model that Minister Amin and myself came up with was to use public-private partnership to find that 100 million to complete it. And we signed off before we left office. When the government came, first they said they were doing an investigation. Then they said that they will find other ways of funding it. 6 months on, it is still there. If you pay attention to public-private partnerships, you will get $100 million, not of taxpayers' money, but of money that you've crowded in from the private sector to do what? To fund it, so that the people do what? Benefit. And so we are recommending that government should pay more attention to PPPs. Minister Agboja told us on the floor that they haven't seen any PPP working. They don't think PPP can work. So they are waiting for the Treasury. And that is why public goods and services will do what? Will suffer. On the Forex side, as has been mentioned, the central bank's intervention, in addition to the gold purchase program, are the major contributors. The IMF has already warned the government that you cannot continue to dump $1.4 billion every 6 months on the market. Today, gold prices are high. The previous government introduced the gold purchase program, which you are following. You've only rebranded PMMC as Gold Board. And you've now sort of expropriated everybody out of gold exports. But you haven't introduced any new policy. But gold prices may not forever be high. Therefore, this approach is not sustainable. We're encouraging the government to, among other things, on the supply side, ensure that Forex earnings on exports are properly retired into the Ghanaian jurisdiction. The LOC requirements must be better attended to. And then even on the demand side, we will recommend that they should still pay some attention to the gold for oil program. Despite the fact that the minister tried to pretend there was no gold for oil program. In fact, you heard him saying that there was no gold for oil program. The Bank of Ghana itself has admitted that there was. And the government itself, he had forgotten that the government itself previously had admitted. You recall the government announced that they have cancelled the gold for oil program. How do you cancel a program that doesn't exist? You see, the propaganda is beginning to expose them. We are suggesting that on the demand for Forex side, the government should pay more attention to the major elements that add up to demand. And the economic policy that they brought to the House. It was after they brought the economic policy that they went back to try and now put up the 24-hour economy program. In this review, the minister has admitted that he doesn't plan to bring coherence and that it is next year that he will try and align the 24-hour economy program with their economic policy. Why? He says it's next year that he will do what? He will fund it. If he's not funding it this year, you can forget about it. It is not happening. But there are other elements in their manifesto which still didn't show up and haven't shown up at mid-year. And we like to remind them. They promised an economic transformation agenda, and then they promised an economic recovery program. We're grateful for your time, and if you have questions, we'll take them now. said we are making the soft copy available to them. Vikram was asking for the soft copy. Okay, that's it. Colleagues, so if you have questions, we'll take them. If you are fine, we'll close.
Okay, so, Honorable, Dr. Apoko made mention of the fact that he thinks that the NPP did well in terms of the stability of the city. And this government is saying that you have no moral right to talk about stability because all the depreciation happened, or the low performance of the city happened under your watch. So how would you react to that assertion?
So let's take a few more and then, yeah.
Just one quick question. You related to the concern of the public sector wage bill and the fact that the finance minister was complaining that it's ballooned. Subsequent to that, the Controller and Accountant General has followed suit. They also complained. And you were the finance minister then. So when you speak to the fact that these recruitments were declared by you at the finance ministry by way of financial clearance, we will believe you. But does that do away with the fact that the wage bill will still go up, regardless of the fact that they were cleared to the recruitment?
Okay, so we have just two questions.
Just two questions.
Well, I can speak a little, and then Dominic, my brother, Wapo. The only point I want to make in the no, it's a short point. He will do a more comprehensive. The only point on the exchange stability that I'd like to mention is that the minister himself in his media review said that they have brought the rate, the exchange rate, back to its 2022 level. Which government was in 2022? Right? And we have had appreciation between government at different times. That is why it may not be good to single out, one period and blame it on one government. Because in his own submission, he has admitted that they have brought it to the 2022 level. And the government that was in 2022 was the NPP government. And so he hasn't done better than us, if you look at even the kind of statement that he put out there. But Gideon will give you better on this.
23.
The second question
23.8.
I'll answer is on the wage bill. You see, under the IMF program, you have certain levels of wage bill that you are supposed to handle. And if you look at the wage bill over the years, they have proportionally declined. And therefore, to give financial clearance for recruitment by what we call the essential sectors, education, health, security services, you do it within the appropriation. So if the appropriation for 2024 could accommodate those recruitments, how come appropriation for 2025 cannot? And so to blame the excessive wage bill on those who were recruited last year, even if it was for the last quarter of the year, it was against appropriation for 2024. And those who started work in 2024, ask them whether they were paid salaries or not. Okay, so how come appropriation for 2025, when their names have gone into the records, can no longer accommodate them? And this is why I was saying that the minister has rather failed to see where the problem is. The hundreds of special assistants and advisors and communication specialists they are imposed on various ministries. We've never seen that before. You will have, representatives of the office of the president in the regions. Haven't you heard about that? They have representatives, presidential aides in the regions. When you have regional ministers,
They are deputy ministers.
and when you have district chief executives, that is what has caused the wage bill to exceed the budget, and not recruitment that were done last year for which financial clearance was given. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, my friend, for that question. So we are not discounting the fact that the city has recorded some is the minister's attempt to kind of position this level of appreciation beyond what was recorded in November to December 2022. Because when the minister spoke, he said that they have been able to reverse the depreciation far beyond the 2022 figure. So he sought to paint a picture that the 42.6% appreciation they have recorded is the highest, the best. And in fact, he said that in the records of this country, and it's far more than what was recorded in 2022. That is what we are saying cannot be accurate. Because in November to December 2022, the CD to the dollar rate moved from 13.1 to 8.3. That is about 57.8% appreciation. So if we want to talk about the period in the history of this country, in the recent past, where there was a massive appreciation of the cedi, it is the November to December period of 2022. So the attempt to throw dust into the eyes of the public to say that what has been recorded now is the best cannot be true. Then the other thing that we are disputing in the minister's narrative is the fact that he sought to mislead the public by saying that they inherited a cedi to dollar rate of 17 in January 2025. And we are saying that cannot be true. The official figure, as we know, is 14.7. In any case, if it is true that they inherited the cedi to dollar rate, which the social commentators and communicators have been throwing all around, if it was 17, and now it has moved to 10.4, if you do the appreciation, to 2.6, and that 42.6 statistically matches with the 14.7 that we are talking about. So the minister knows very well that what he was saying was wrong. But he decided to throw in that, and he didn't mention it once. He mentioned the 17 in 2 different paragraphs of the budget statement.
So it wasn't a mistake.
It wasn't a mistake.
Deliberate.
That falsehood cannot be allowed to stay. And the other thing that we are drawing the minister's attention to is the fact that, yes, whilst we are working at maintaining stability for the currency, we must also work to power of that currency is also important. And if we really want to look at the trend of prices in any economy, you don't just look at the headline inflation. There's something that we call the GDP deflator, or the implicit price deflector, which measures the overall trends in prices in the economy. If you observe, from 2023 to 2024, the reduction or the drop in Ghana's GDP deflector was huge. 2023 somewhere around 50.4%. By December 2024, it had reduced to 25%. It means that the signal of the general reduction in prices on the economy or stagnation of sale was huge. From December 2024 till date, the drop in the implicit price deflator or the GDP deflator is just 17. So you can see that from 25 to 17, the reduction is small compared to 50.4 to 25 as was recorded between 2023 and 2024. And that is why the government may be seeing a drop in inflation, but implicitly prices are not going down on the markets, and you wouldn't understand why it is happening that way. If you don't get all the pieces of the jigsaw to work together, as Kojo was trying to say, align your economic policies with the outputs and the expenditure and the areas that the expenditure is going, you begin to have some of these misalignments. And that is why you will see headlines economic maxim that prices are sticky downwards. It is not always the case that prices are sticky downwards. It depends on what is prevailing in the economy. And if you want to really see whether or not prices will go down in tandem with inflation, watch the GDP deflator. The rate of drop in the GDP deflator is not as much as recorded in the previous government. That is exactly what we are talking about.
Honorable, please, did I hear you say that the CD, as at the time you were leaving office, was 14 CDs, as again the 17, around 17 CDs that
check the Bank of Ghana data.
Because I don't want to go into the percentage in terms of the appreciation between the previous government and now. But I just want you to reiterate that the CD, as it was 14 CDs when you were leaving office, as against 17 that some of us have been to the bank, to the bureau to correct.
Yes, I will not just state it. It is a fact that during the 8 years of the NPP government, Ghana recorded interbank CD dollar rate of 17. It was non-existent. It never happened. There wasn't any single day, and anybody can check, there wasn't any single day that the Bank of Ghana interbank rate reached 17 cedis to the dollar. Okay? You can go to the records of the Bank of Ghana, you wouldn't find any such data. So it beats imagination why the finance minister will come and give a Bank of Ghana interbank rate of today, which is 10.4%, and reference that to a non-existing interbank rate of 17. As at the time the MPP left office, the CD to the dollar rate was around 14.7 cedis to the dollar. It never, and I repeat, it never reached the 17 that they are talking about. If they are conjuring any figure from any other market, we do not know. If he wants to do so, then he should not be talking about 10.4 today. Because if you go to the market, you go to the Abochi today, you won't find CD to the dollar at 10.4. You'd rather be buying it around 13 or 12.8 or thereabout. But that is not what we are talking about. The finance minister presents official records from the Bank of Ghana. And that record of 17 is nowhere in the books of the Bank of Ghana.
Just one last thing. So, you know, when we say the government has introduced 8 new taxes, sometimes because they hide the taxes, a lot of people don't catch on to it quickly. In the original budget that they brought, there were some of the taxes that they didn't even capture under revenue measures. They use English to just say that they will extend the sunset clause. If there's no tax between 2026, 2027, and 2028, and you impose a new tax 2026, 2027, 2028, it's a new tax that you have introduced. But they will use English to wrap it that they have extended the sunset clause. And if you don't, may I say, open your eye properly, you won't see it. So let me just give you a list of the about 8 taxes that they have introduced in 6 months. If you add the tariffs, you will get to about 10. If you add the increases in tariffs, it will be about 10. But I just want to hit on the 8 actual taxes they brought. There's a 2% growth and sustainability levy on the gross production of the mining companies. Now you've seen the Chamber of Mines strengthening their advocacy against it. You remember in March, we cautioned the government about it. Then there's a special import levy of 2% on cost, insurance, and freight value of certain goods. Number 3 is the 15% VAT on non-life insurance premiums. Number 4 is the growth and sustainability levy introduced for 2026, 2027, and 2028. But they've done it now and have hidden it. They called it an extension of the sunset clause. If you don't open your eyes, you wouldn't know that it's a new tax that they have introduced. Then there's a special import levy introduced for 2026, 2027, and 2028. That's the one that when they even brought to the floor, Dr. Amin, if you recall, Adongo tried to say that it should be extended into perpetuity. Yes. And the minority caught onto it and drew their attention. That's a new tax that they've introduced. Then they brought, before we rose the last time, they brought the energy sector shortfall and debt repayment levy of 1.95 for petrol and naphtha, and then 1.93 for diesel. I'm sure you recall that one. Then number 7 was when they brought the 8% levy on petroleum products, and again tried to hide it by saying that it's only 1 Ghana cedi per liter, and you know you don't buy 1 liter. It's 8%, and that's why Dr. Amin said you have noticed that fuel prices have gone up by how much? 8%. And then on the day the minister read the review, again in the middle of the night, they brought the fishing levy, what the minister described as the fishing levy. That is 8 taxes so far. And our recommendation on it is that these taxes are rather going to translate into inflation down the line. There will be a lagged effect, but it will translate into inflation. If you don't believe us, follow what the Bank of Ghana is saying. The Bank of Ghana is warning that these taxes will contribute to inflationary pressures. But we have already advised. We have said that as a patriotic opposition, where we should give recommendations, we will. In the beginning of the year, when we did it, they rejected it. Mid-year, we've made these recommendations as well. Colleagues, we thank you. All the best.
Let me show you something also before you go. This is Bank of Ghana website. That's the Bank of Ghana website. You can also open the website and see the historical interbank Forex rates. On January 6th, when we left, January 7th, when we left office, what was the rate? Check it yourself, ladies and gentlemen. January 6th was, I have January 6th here. January 6th was buying 14.6 cedis to $1.
So where did he get the 17?
14.6, selling 14.7. So, my friends, the media, I beg you, you have to open your eyes a little bit. Because when the minister says 17, this is publicly available information. It just takes you a minute to cross-check with the Bank of Ghana website, and you point out to the public that he's misinforming the public. Why would he say 17 when the publicly available official information says 14.6? But because we don't do that research, we just report what the minister says, and we should not be contributing to the misinformation of the public, especially from official platforms like the House of Parliament. We shouldn't. Otherwise, we'll be accused of condoning, to poisoning the atmosphere. But as media, we are the watchdogs. You are the fourth estate of the Reha. You are supposed to scrutinize the figures and then tell the public what is the truth about this, so that politicians don't write on the back of you to misinform the public. So I'm begging you, let's all do that. The way we have scrutinized the figures here, don't leave it to politicians to do that. That is, you are watching over all of us. So why is it that when he says the previous government didn't do well, you report it? But when he says that, when he presents a figure that is wrong, you won't tell him, or you won't correct it. So we thank you very much. God bless you all, and God bless our country.
No, before you leave, talking about scrutiny, the minister also mentioned that from 1st to 6th of January, we spent 4.5 billion from the IMF money. We reported it. You are here.
How possible is that?
So,
How possible is that?
And spent it on who?
yeah, he said that.
But he himself said that 2.8 billion. You didn't report it to her. I listened to what he said. He said 2.8 billion from the 4.5 billion the IMF dispersed. And then one media house just went out and said he spent 4 billion, 4.something billion in 6 months. That was wrong reportage.
But there's 2.8 billion
Yeah, but because
of
it
the
was, yes.
gold board money that you have to look for. Missing. We've just done the numbers. If you look at the gold proceeds and what they are reporting, we've just outlined it to you. You should be asking them to account for it.
Are you sending it to
Then they should come. But you see, first they say they didn't do currency dumping. So how can they say they use that to support the city?
Send me a message.
Yes,
That was the minority addressing the press on government's economic policy. Some of the things that they highlighted was that the finance minister, that is Dr. Kasiel Atuforsen, has undermined inherited gross reserves. They also claim that the finance minister's claims undue credit for the debt restructuring success. And they also mentioned that a number of key government policies, including Akokon Kitinkiti, 1 million coders program, the Women's Development Bank, as well as the 24-hour economy, these key programs that have been launched, no funds have been released to run those programs. They also mentioned that government's fiscal policy misaligns with the monetary policy, and that the marine levy, which was introduced, will affect the prices of fish. And they also mentioned that they're warning that the new taxes that the government has introduced will spike charges across various sectors. For more on this minority presser, you can log on to channel1newsonline.com for more stories. My name is Inosafo. We return to normal programming.
DSTV means choosing.
Amazing acting.
Face friending while streaming.
Front row at the gaming and super fanning while on the going. Winning! Binging and blockbustering. While others are white ricing, you're jolloffing.
This looks so good.
With something for everyone. Anything is possible when you're DSTVing. Start today with all sorts of packages to match your...
Me pay so dear me chame sister me dad dear me chibia na me amshishi me akuda ida me many tea o some me saka me se me ida so te saka se dia so da mo hwe juju so mo bag de ho dia no ba bi free so one hwe bag na ma mo na me hwe wow se me nya kwanfo bia na mo sori o
In a world filled with challenges, we all need guidance, hope, and a lifeline to anchor us.
This is Lifeline, and I'm your host, Fred Crunchy Mensa.
From social issues, relationship challenges, and family matters, Lifeline is here to inspire, uplift, and guide you on your journey.
Where we give you support, where we hold your hand through the valley and through the thick and thins of life.
Join Bishop Fred Crunchy Mensa.
I welcome you especially to Lifeline.
Every Tuesday and Thursday at 10 p.m. right here on Channel 1 TV. Let's walk this path together, strengthen our faith, our families, and our lives. Lifeline, because every soul deserves a guiding light. Tune in to Lifeline on Channel 1 TV and let's grow together.
Welcome to The Point of View. This is your favorite current affairs show here on Channel 1 Television. Here on The Point of View, we pick the right topics, get the right guests, and interview them on issues that matter to you. Well, the show tonight is a bit different. We're celebrating a legend, a man whose music told our story. Charles Kojo Fosu, a.k.a. Daddy Lumba. That icon of a Ghanaian musician. Sadly died on Saturday, June 25. Tonight, we examine his legacy and celebrate him from three very unique angles. I speak to a colleague of mine who's a music producer and also a linguist of her own who understands and interprets the songs of Daddy Lumba. We also speak to musician Manifest, who's a rapper who obviously has some good things to say about this legend. And Professor Lloyd Amwa, I call him a political philosopher who contextualizes the life of Lumba in our time. We're live. We'll be happy to hear from you.